What I really align with right now is the idea that love can be a high quality momentary experience that happens between anyone at any point at any time. And yes, it's fleeting, but how just focusing on this, to me, that's a pretty empowering concept.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Olivia Ellis, it is wonderful to see you. We got connected by a common friend of ours, Jody, and I am so excited that you are here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. Excited to be here as well.
Now, you are someone who has lots of letters behind her name. You do many things. So before we jump into all of that, how would you describe yourself?
I would describe myself as a lively educator. So focus very broadly on the wellness industry. So spanning across fitness, nutrition, healthy mindset, recovery. So the large umbrella of wellness.
Yeah, I mean, you are definitely speaking our language here at the Home of Healthspan. We always talk about the 5 pillars with fitness, nutrition, sleep and recovery, stress management, mindset, and then our social connection and purpose. And I think, your education probably is leading with that purpose to carry across those other 4 branches. So I look forward to jumping in to all of those with you today. Now, if I understand correctly, you started more on the nutrition side. Is that fair to say, and educationally?
So my career has definitely hopped around. So if anyone's listening to this, watching this, and they feel like they've taken a few zigzags, a few turns in their career, I very much relate. So when I was younger, I thought that I wanted to go into medicine. And so I was actually pre-med. And I realized I was terrified of needles. So it was the worst idea in the world. And I became super interested in nutrition, the idea of nutrition as medicine, and was just for fun reading that and explored being a registered dietitian. From there, I was doing an internship at a location in Mexico, and I just fell in love with the fitness industry. And so I started pursuing, getting certified in a variety of modalities in the fitness industry. I actually had a career in fitness management. And I realized, okay, well, what is it about fitness that I'm so passionate about? And I realized that it was when you watch someone enter a gym or enter a fitness class and leave a fitness class, it's the difference, the look on their face, their energy levels. It's something that's so visible. Like if you were to just sit outside of a fitness center, it's so visible. And I realized it was that I was most passionate about. And how do you take that and kind of amplify it? And so I started going down a rabbit hole of positive psychology. And the fitness industry, when it comes to athletes and sports, professional athletes have sports psychologists, which help them to work at their peak. But the question is, for the general exerciser, what's most important? In some cases, they might have performance goals, but for the most part, it's how do we make it an enjoyable experience? How do we make it something that people are continuously drawn back to, that they're just intrinsically motivated to pursue? And so I started getting really passionate about positive psychology. And then from there, I had explored all these different areas and some educator roles that I was put in. I also started doing workshops on pretty much everything else. So on, how to pursue good quality of sleep, how to develop a healthy relationship with stress. And my PhD right now is on positive developmental psychology. So I look at a lifespan and what allows someone to live their best life, but my research is on love. And so also leading workshops on high quality relationships, how to enhance our current relationships, and also, just seek really high quality interactions throughout the day and how that's related to our various measures of health and well-being. So I kind of went at it, one area at a time, but now looking back, it makes so much sense to me, how I've ended up here, because I've come to the realization that it's not just about one health behavior. It's not just about one pillar. It's the whole gamut, which, if we focus on one, it can definitely help for the others. So that's kind of led me to where I'm at today. And so I'm passionate about all of it.
Yeah, there are so many questions that raises, like every time you'd say something, it's like, okay, that's where I'll start. And then you'd say something else and no, that's where I'll start. I actually want to start with the last, because I think very similar to the narrative arc of your career so far, maybe some have inverted, but that the idea of the social connection and the connection in the first place and the level of importance it has, right? If you're feeling alone and isolated, it's the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day on your physical health. And how few people know or realize that, including me maybe 12 months ago, of, hey, that's just not an important thing. I'm going to check out to go focus on these 4 pillars because these are the right 4 pillars. Like, no, actually, this one's at least as important. I'm curious, in the past, as you're doing your research, what have been the most surprising findings you've come across? And then how have you changed how you live as a result? And once you learn, it's like, you can't unknow it once you know it. And so how has it impacted how you live?
I think one of the barriers especially when I give workshops on social connection I think one of the main barriers is immediately when I talk about like really high quality relationships, I think people who may be struggling in relationships, whether it's romantic, family, friends, and let's be real, we are human, we are dynamic creatures. It's not like we attain this perfect state of, even in healthy relationships, there are disagreements, right? And so I think immediately when I bring that topic up and I talk about the health benefits of positive relationships, I think there is a section of the population that immediately turns inward and says, oh no, is this, relationship that I've been in, or, has this been doing some sort of damage? And I think for me, what I really try to empower people to understand as well is that the latest research that's talking about high quality interactions is not necessarily specifying that it needs to be within a particular relationship type. Of course, close friends, family members, if someone has a romantic partner, those are people that we might interact with and see most often, so they can be common sources of these high quality interactions. But the latest theory of what is love argues that love can be a really high quality momentary interaction that can happen between anyone at any point, at any time, even strangers, even in a non-romantic sense. But having more of these, and if we feel that our interactions for a greater percentage of the time, are characterized as this like really high quality interaction, well, these could be related to various measures of well-being. And so someone going to a grocery store, if I were to lean into like a really high quality interaction in a checkout line, or even myself, I've been challenging myself in places that I commonly go inward and probably isolate myself, such as yesterday, I went to, I've been rehabbing. I was in a serious car accident about 2 to 3 months ago, and I've been rehabbing particular areas that were affected. But in my head, when I think of going to physical therapy, I think of it, I kind of turn inward and somewhat isolate myself. And so I'm really trying to get in the headspace of, okay, well, I'm working with someone for almost an hour. How can I make this a really high quality interaction? And research says currently there are 3 characteristics of these really high quality interactions. So termed positivity resonance, and it's shared positive affect between the people. And research says it could be between 2 or more people. So if you're to think about you're in a group of friends, or, if you're at a sporting event and you're sharing in, this really amazing experience with a bunch of people. And then a second one is mutual care, mutual concern that's displayed through behavioral synchrony. So it could be similar body language. If one person's head is tilted to the side, is the other person's head tilted to the side. If someone's leaning into a conversation, am I leaning in? Or walking together could be behavioral synchrony. And then the third one is synced at the level of physiology, which I kid you not, the literature says, are their hearts beating in rhythm? Yeah. I have no idea if my heart is beating in rhythm with someone else, but similar parts of the brain lighting up in conversation, which would make sense because if we're in conversation, similar parts of the brain would be lighting up.
Is it fair to say something like a concert is almost like the best blending of this together because you're getting this positive synchronicity across all the modalities?
Yeah, it would totally make sense, right? Because someone's watching the same concert or the same game or whatever it is. They're thinking similar things. They might be jumping up and down, like dancing, or jumping up and down, cheering in the stands, and sharing in positive affect. So certainly someone could describe that as like a really high quality loving experience according to this term. And to me, that's not a limiting term. It's saying, in positivity resonance, hey, even if you're just walking to the mailbox and you're waving to a neighbor, doing our best to try to lean into those interactions and how that can have a positive effect.
Not to get too kind of nerdy technical, but you use this word that everybody uses, but might think it means different things to each of them. So when you say love, right, can you have this interaction with love in the checkout line, in a concert with complete strangers, what these other areas are? How do you define what that word means?
There are many terms that have like one common set definition, but the idea of love, it means something different to almost everyone, right? We use the term in the English language to refer to I love my family, I love my dog, I love a romantic partner, I love the coffee that I had this morning, right? So we use it to refer to a variety of things. And in different languages, they actually have different terms to refer to differentiate those different types of love. And the reality is, when we're trying to get at like, what is love? What is the experience of love? Researchers are now arguing that there might not be one objective truth to that statement. And so we can have different ways of approaching it, looking at someone's physiology, looking at, in terms of like what's going on in the brain. But right now, there are still a variety of definitions of what is love. And I think what I'm most connecting to in this moment, and I do my best to stay open to the world, right? If I read a peer-reviewed journal article, or if I'm reading something, my favorite textbook, you're going to laugh. My coffee table textbook is The New Psychology of Love, second edition. And it's literally an entire textbook that talks about theories behind love, right? So in the context of romantic relationships, what is love? In the context of family dynamics, looking at attachment styles, and then also looking at the idea of culture, how someone's understanding of culture then shapes their view of love. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there is one objective truth to the age-old question, what is love? But what I really align with right now is the idea that love can be a high-quality, momentary experience that happens between anyone at any point, at any time. And yes, it's fleeting, but how just focusing on this, to me, that's a pretty empowering concept. So that idea of positivity resonance, the high-quality interactions.
I love your take on this. That I'm coming more and more around to it's not a feeling, right? There are other words that can describe the feelings, but love, especially if you're describing it as something that happened in these momentary interactions, it is an intent or purpose in how you're engaging. And so you can do something with love in the way and the reason you're doing, if that makes sense. And so the love of genuine care, curiosity in your interaction with your physical therapist, right? That can be love. I just go back to, I worked at McKinsey very early in my career, and they were amazing in the trainings we would do to just build these really strong connections and break down the barriers, get to kind of level 6 communication. And I would just find myself, people that I just met, the day before, I'm like, I love all 30 people in this room. I love these people. I feel in synchronicity with them. And it was that intent of, in communicating with them, in working with them, that it's something outside myself, of the genuine curiosity, care about not what that person can do for me, not about each other, but about that individual. So I don't know if there's any basis on research or science on any of that, but that's something I've been trying to figure out.
That's incredible. And kudos to them for making that be a priority and a focus, because it's beneficial for the individual, also for organizations. And if there are any people within organizations listening to this, there's a whole lot of benefits for organizations for focusing on social connections. When people feel more socially connected in a workplace, they take fewer sick days. So it's just kind of a win across the board, an individual's well-being in a workplace environment.
Yeah, I think Gallup's research, the number one predictor of job satisfaction and staying around is, do I have a best friend at work? That was the number one, I think, pretty consistently year on year. So it really is that idea of connection, just permeates everything. So you mentioned going into interactions that normally you would be closed off and opening yourself up to making them meaningful interactions. Are there any other things on that kind of social connection point that you've worked into your days or your weeks, knowing the importance of this pillar now?
So for me, it really, because they're all related, right? So if my levels of stress are higher in a given day, I might need to focus on taking a few deep breaths to then be in a headspace to set me up for success for engaging in a high quality interaction, right? So if I'm feeling more like narrow-minded, focused on whatever it is, I might not necessarily be thinking about another person's well-being. So sometimes focusing on those other pillars, the other elements, helps for in terms of socialization.
So on that, just rolling straight into kind of the mindset and the stress management side, you mentioned breathing. Do you have a breathwork practice that you do consistently or daily, or what does that look like for you?
I don't necessarily do a breathwork practice, daily in terms of like 5 minutes before bedtime. I focus on this. Breathing for me is typically in a moment when I need it, especially if I notice that my stress levels are a little bit higher. It's also something that I typically do as part of like my routine or rituals right before I do a lot of public speaking. And so right before I dive into that, I focus on taking a few deep breaths, even if it's just one, right? Before I close the door in an education room, I take a moment, take a deep breath, let it go, and then go ahead and dive in. Just taking a little moment for myself. Some other things that I do that are part of a greater ritual routine for me to put me in a headspace with managing stress and then also thinking bigger picture is I have typically a necklace that I might wear, and it has a tree on it. And I really connect to the idea of trees, which could span across people could connect it to a variety of things. But for me, when I need to get into a good headspace, I would just kind of hold on to it, take a deep breath and think to myself, okay, well, what do I really need in this moment? I need to ground myself. I need to root down, or in this moment, I need to do something outside of my comfort zone. So I really need to branch out. Or in this moment, I'm noticing that I am feeling like I'm wavering a little bit. And so I need to like hold strong or whatever it is. And so for me, just taking a few moments and kind of connecting an intention to before I dive into whatever is incredibly helpful. For me, when I do start to notice that I'm getting more narrow-minded, getting into more so an abundance mindset is extremely helpful. So in that, I might do some journaling. There's abundance meditations that I might listen to. My friend Camilla has an abundance series on her app ZenMe that I sometimes listen to. And so getting more so into an abundance mindset, or for me also, doing something that is outside of my comfort zone helps me feel more like broader in terms of mindset in general. So whether it's even just getting into the car and going to a place that I'm not familiar with and just sitting there and being uncomfortable, just for me, also helps to expand my awareness and take me out of myself by experiencing something new and something different.
That's a really interesting practice. I had a teacher in 10th grade that would every now and then we would shift the desks we were in. And his point was changing your perspective can happen by literally changing your physical perspective. So just changing what you're looking at, changing what you're seeing can change how you think. And it sounds like you get there in your car in a similar way. Each of those things, and it may just because you're so in tune with what your needs are, they seem responsive to a particular need at a particular point. And so is that typically how you do it versus, hey, here's my consistent day-to-day, my journaling or my meditation or my breathwork, and saying, no, here's my toolkit. And then depending on it, maybe it's a ZenMe, maybe it's some breathwork, maybe it's driving in my car, but I'm going to do what's needed in that moment versus the thing that I just do each day.
As part of more so like a well-rounded routine, I would argue that I myself am, there are some things that I really try to create a routine about, such as going to bed at a similar time, waking up at a similar time. I'm not perfect at it. It's always a work in progress. But I really do try to mix up my life a lot. But I would say that engaging in physical activity is a part of my routine. What that looks like from week to week could be quite different based upon, what my life is looking like in that moment, whether it's yoga or boxing or cycling so I would say physical activity, like really making sure that's a priority and doing that regularly. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that I need to go to the gym. It could just be going out for a walk or going out for a walk with friends. And another one is making sure that I'm prioritizing spending time in nature. And I would say that that is a big part of my routine as well. So just being out in nature, allowing myself to be alone with my thoughts and being in awe by the beauty of nature. So I would say that those are kind of crucial elements to my overall routine in terms of managing my stress levels and staying in the right mindset. And then a lot of the other strategies. And I guess I would also say some other things that I do, even just a cup of caffeine-free hot tea for me is something super comforting. So in times that I have been more so working in an office, and I wouldn't necessarily say that I work in an office now as much as I have in the past, but for something about like having a warm beverage, for me was just like really comforting, really relaxing. So I would say that that's part of it. And then when my mind really is racing, I would say that I'm more so reactive with journaling in that capacity. But ongoing routines, physical activity, and time in nature are kind of my crucials. Can't live without.
Yeah. So on that physical activity, having been in the industry for years, trained, certified, all the things, and not getting locked into a single modality, what does that look like for you today in terms of number of hours a day, days a week, and mixing it up of mobility versus strength, all the different ways you can do it?
So I should also say that I've learned from mistakes, as sometimes we do. So when I was younger, actually in high school, if you'll believe it, I was very into weightlifting. And I don't want to brag, but in my high school, my tiny high school, I was pound for pound strongest girl in my high school. So I was like really into weightlifting. I actually like worked out with the football team, and I was stubborn. And so I was lifting a lot of really heavy weights and had some issues with my lower back. And so I went to, I worked on rehabbing that, and my back is in a great place. And then I decided to go the other direction. And then I got really into distance running and triathlons. And then I developed a stress fracture. And, I got certified in spinning when I was 18. So I was experimenting with some other things for cross training at an earlier age. But I think through these injuries, I started to ask myself the question, okay, well, what's really important here? What's sustainable for me? And I realized that, okay, well, maybe I don't need to, for some people, they might be really motivated to diving all into one specific modality. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. But for me, because I tried all that and it wasn't necessarily great on my body at the time, I had these my body wasn't necessarily balanced. My right side was a whole lot stronger than my left side. And I was kind of recovering after these injuries. Then I really started prioritizing, okay, let's do a little bit of everything, but maybe not necessarily in excess. So, light strength training, hiking, yoga, riding a stationary bike, and then what I really do enjoy, but I haven't been doing recently post-accident, is kickboxing or boxing in general. So things to mix it up in a given week. I'm also a big supporter that in order to make something that is intrinsically enjoyable, we need to really focus on the individual, right? So what are their values? What do they align with? And how can we make it a part of their everyday routine, not something that's necessarily separate, such as, I live this really beautiful and abundant life. And then separate of that, okay, I need to do this physical activity, because that's not necessarily something that might be motivating to them in the long run. But what would it look like if, okay, so maybe I do have this really close friend and we always want to meet up on Monday nights or something like that. What if we made that a walking night or something where we can engage in physical activity together, and then we still have that time together? In terms of my routine, it really does vary from week to week and based upon what else is going on in my day. So for example, if I'm filming for the spinning app or leading a spinning instructor certification or something like that, I'm not, on those days, I wouldn't necessarily be going to yoga in the evening or yoga in the morning. But typically I try to keep a very well-rounded, balanced, and doing activities that genuinely bring me joy and don't feel like a separate part of my life.
That's a big part of why we do what we do with Olivia and with this show and profiling different role models. Is the point is, it doesn't matter if these are 1 to 20, the most research-backed, impactful things. If you're not going to do or stick with 1 to 13, they're kind of irrelevant. The most effective for you is number 14. And so finding the thing that's actually effective for you is different. The subjective truth is different than the objective truth. And the objective truth is objectively wrong for you if you can't and won't stick with it. It doesn't have any benefit for you.
What a great point. I really connect with what you just said.
And so you mentioned recording for the spinning app. Do you have other things at home? So separate from the gym, like you're not going into the kickboxing gym right now. When you're traveling, when you're at home, are there things that you have that you say, hey, these are easy to get into, to do? Like, of course, walking with friends, you pop on some shoes, you go walking with friends, but anything else?
If I'm traveling in general, I think a great way to understand an area is on foot. But also, I myself typically travel and try to experience the world through natural beauty. And so I am a fan of hiking. And so I use the All Trails app really often. And it's honestly one of my all-time favorite tools, because it's a mixture of, people will actually review trails. They'll review hiking, like hikes. And it's also a source of comedy for me. So one of my all-time favorite trails that I saw a review for, I was in Alaska, and someone reviewed the trail, and the only pictures that they posted was their dog in a hot dog costume on this trail. And it just it made me laugh so hard. To me, it's like a form of a positivity booster going through this. Like, I don't feel like I'm wasting time or anything going through these reviews. And then for me, it's also a fun way to get to know an area is through hiking, seeing the natural beauty in that area. If they, and sometimes the all trails will just be, not even in a mountain or something, but just, along a street or along a park or something like that. And then also in terms of staying physically active, if I'm traveling, I typically try to do what activities that are involved in that local area. So the last time, for example, when I was in Puerto Rico in April, my sister and I did like a kayaking, canoeing excursion to see the bioluminescence. And so that's something that I really connect with. So making the physical activity really a part of that experience. And at home, I do have a spinner bike. But, and so, I do have the opportunity of taking spinning classes on our app. And then also for me, like as an instructor, I can prepare what I'm doing for my trainings and whatnot. So that's typically what I do from home. But typically in the home, and then I do have a resistance tube and a band at home. But apart from that, for me, I really need some sort of disconnect between my home and the workout. Otherwise, I myself and knowing myself would get very distracted at home, right? You have the laundry, you do the dishes. It's pretty easy just to hop off and get distracted by something else. So making some sort of separation for me is pretty helpful.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar for some people who can work from home great. They're super productive, get down, and others like, oh, there's no chance, right? The TV's there, the kitchen's there, I would never get anything done. Whereas me, everything else doesn't matter. I'm in the zone, I'm working. It just depends on the person.
Yeah. And that's amazing. Yeah.
Just how different people are wired, and then recognizing it, right? Like just being in tune of it's not good or bad, it just is. And so then knowing what is, how do I design it to make it work for my life?
And I think that definitely circles back to what you were saying before in terms of, if there is that list of 15 things, even if, XYZ has been shown to be super helpful for people, letting people understand that there can be a variety of ways that we all reach similar outcomes. So we don't necessarily, as educators, need to push like a one right way. I was talking to my friend recently about journaling and talking about how it was beneficial for me sometimes. And they were saying how they get frustrated when they journal, and because they never feel like they're doing it right, or they don't know what to write about. And so the conversation then turned into, well, number one, there doesn't have to be like a one right way or one right outcome. I knew someone else who their goal for journaling every day was to just write the date at the top of the page. And that was it. Like they didn't need to do anything else. And they called that a success. And so these different strategies, it doesn't necessarily mean that like everyone needs to connect to them. And we could try something. And just because research says that it's great, if it's not something that we connect to, it's also a beautiful thing to step away and try something else. That's see what additional tools might be added to our relaxation strategy tool belt, or whatever tool belt we're looking to add to. It's a beautiful thing to explore.
I mean, the example of the journaling of also, why are you doing it? Right? Do you have an objective associated with it? I think a lot on how I understand it. Westerners like going into meditation, and people will say the same thing about meditation. I'm terrible at it, et cetera, et cetera. And Westerners, a lot of times, they do it. Oh, I want to lower my blood pressure. I want to help my mindset. Right? There are these objectives. Versus the Eastern philosophy of you don't have an objective. You meditate, right? Like you just go in to go meditate. There's not a goal. There's not. And so the same with the journaling of maybe the issue is having a goal in the first place. Or if you have that goal, maybe there's a way more efficient or better way for you to get there. And there's a separate thing of, do you want to journal or not? But if you do, just do it, right? It doesn't need to be tied to a specific objective.
Totally. It's not graded. No one else is going to see it.
So you mentioned kind of mixing it up and then coming from the nutrition world. So my parents were both physicians. My dad was a pediatric cardiologist, and he was tall, so he carried weight. It seemed fine, right? Tall guys can kind of carry it differently. And then introduced him to this, the Tim Ferriss slow carb diet. In a single year, he lost 65 pounds. He started running half marathons. He never felt better. He's like, oh my God. And he said, basically what I had to do was unlearn everything they taught me in med school about nutrition. And so I'm curious, coming through the educational system in nutrition, right? Had it been corrected or fixed there, or is it fixed now? There's so many camps. There's so many religions when it comes to religion, to nutrition. Like, how professionally, how did you come into it? And then knowing everything you know and how you're living, how does that now impact how you think about nutrition in your own life?
First of all, kudos to him for, exploring those different sides, for pursuing those changes within himself. Physicians, I mean, speaking of higher levels of stress and whatnot. So I think that's beautiful that he was able to really explore that side. In terms of nutrition, when I was younger, oftentimes we learn from personal experience. So when I was younger, I was actually, I would argue, an extremist when it comes to eating and nutrition. And now I've really evolved there are so many things in terms of nutrition that can affect someone's choices. And I'm not necessarily someone who's going to promote, one right way of eating. But I do think, becoming aware of energy levels in response to food can be a really great way to determine, what we should be consuming more often. And that's a huge part of the mindset for me is, hey, just try to focus on the decisions that are considered healthier more often. When I was younger, like really young, think of like little Olivia, I pretty much gave myself the title, self-proclaimed world's largest sweet tooth. And I have evidence to support this claim. My family thinks it's hilarious. I'm in the wellness industry because there was after a holiday, I had like a gallon-sized bag of candy. And my parents at the time told me, okay, Olivia, today and today only, you can have as many pieces of candy as you want, thinking I would have 3 to 4. And then after today, you can only have 1 piece of candy a day. And so little Olivia took this very seriously and ate almost the entire gallon-sized bag of candy.
How did you feel?
Yeah, well, I was a resilient little one.
Okay.
I'm telling you this to say, like, I come from a background where I had a very large sweet tooth and then went the other direction where I was an extremist with what I was eating. And nowadays, I still am, I still enjoy chocolate, or if my body says that I really want a burger, I'll have a burger. But because if you were to tell me, hey, Olivia, you can never have chocolate ever again, well, it's going to be all that I can think about, and I'll probably have it as soon as possible. So for me, what I most align with is trying to choose the healthier option more often and focusing on how I feel the next day based upon the decisions that I made for eating the day before. So, am I feeling groggy? Am I feeling energized? My body really responds to eating plants more often than animals. But I also have friends who feel very differently. And so I think it's a combination of how we feel, which is also based upon a variety of other factors. Enjoyment is a factor. Culture is another factor that affects the food choices that we make. And then also being realistic about it, making sure that we are looking at getting our blood work done and meeting with a registered dietitian if there are any changes that need to be made. But overall thinking well-rounded, making sure that we're trying to prioritize eating fruits and vegetables generally, those whole grains. And then the reality is, if someone's goal is weight management, if we really are focusing on the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, I have had patients before, in the hospital say, Olivia, it's wild because when I eat the right amount of fruits and vegetables that are recommended for me in a day, I'm full and I don't necessarily have time to think about all these other foods that, before were a temptation for me.
I say a lot of time that is the 80-20, right? Of instead of thinking what I can't have, just say, hey, my baseline, I'm going to get X amount of protein, right? Whether it's the half a gram or a gram per pound, right? Wherever it can't be kind of fall in. I'm going to get that, right? That's a start. And then I'm going to get 700 grams of fresh plants. And then you're satiated pretty well around that. And so then if you have a cookie, you'll be okay. You've gotten all your nutrients and you're eating one as opposed to a bag of Oreos, right? And it works. If you just get your base right, then that 20%, you're going to enjoy your life. You should.
And that one cookie, we're probably enjoying and savoring more than the entire bag of Oreos.
Mindlessly eating a bag, that you just kind of checked out. So given that, in that kind of approach, what is your daily nutrition routine like? Do you eat breakfast? Do you have something you start the day with, the warm tea or whatever? How does that look over the course of a day for you?
I'm a very boring eater.
So am I. So I think you're in good company.
Yeah. So typically in the morning, some sort of oatmeal. I live by myself. And so the reality is fruits, vegetables, these are things that are going to go bad pretty quickly. And so frozen fruits are my best friend. So I pretty much pack the freezer with frozen fruits. And typically oatmeal in the morning. And then for lunch, it might be something like avocado toast with eggs on it. And for dinner, typically a really large salad, sweet potato. And that's, my friends joke that I don't cook, I assemble. And I make jokes with patients at the hospital. The hospital that I work at I give them a lot of credit because I think they're very progressive. So I do workshops for cardiac patients of lifestyle changes so that they can make for a healthy heart. And they actually built a cooking school. And they have cooking demonstrations of how to make some of their favorite recipes, but healthier and more in alignment with their heart health. And the patients, whenever I come in, they're like, oh, are you cooking for us today? And I always joke with them, you don't want me cooking for you. And then I say, I eat very much in line with what we're talking about, but my cooking school would be, this is how you peel a banana. This is how you open a container of non-fat Greek yogurt. But I also think that that's a helpful narrative too, saying that, I eat relatively healthy, but I'm not necessarily spending hours and hours a day in a kitchen. Just something that's simple, something that fills me up, something that I enjoy eating. And something like that is pretty typical in terms of snacks, like banana, peanut butter, trying to look over into my cabinet right now.
You supplement at all, whether it's omega-3s or vitamins, protein, anything on top of your meals?
I myself don't necessarily add additional supplements. If I am working with someone that is, so for example, I understand that I am low, when I've gotten my blood work done, vitamin D is something that I need to be cautious of. And I also want to make sure that I'm getting enough calcium in a day. I know that those are two things that are really important for me. Typically, I'll say under the guidance of a registered dietitian for those. And then, but there aren't necessarily any supplements that I personally have educated myself enough to say, this is what we should be doing.
Less recommendation to others than just what you take, right? Like you say, hey, I get enough protein from my diet. I don't actually use a protein powder to supplement. Versus me, I eat almost entirely plants. So I do 2 protein shakes a day to get enough protein in my diet. So, just very personal to you. What is it that you do? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't necessarily supplement on top of what I'm currently doing. But for someone that like myself, who similar to you, I don't necessarily eat animals very often, really making sure that I am getting it from other sources such as like fish or something like that.
Now, can I ask on your salads? Like, does that change seasonally? What do you put in your salad? I have very complicated salads. I eat 2 salads a day, and I have all the things in my salad. I'm curious what you put in your salads, just from personal curiosity.
Well, again, I'm a very boring eater, and even when I'm assembling, I I love Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's has a bunch of prepackaged stuff, so to me, that's something super easy, and so I really don't get too elaborate. But I'm really curious about what your salads look like then.
Yeah, so I used to like, I love the Trader Joe's, the Southwest ones that had the pepitas and like all that. Like I did like those and the things you could put on top, but I just got away from it and started making my own. So I'll do like a mix of spring, arugula, spinach as a base in the spring and summer. So I'm different seasonally. So spring and summer, kind of fresh greens, sliced red pepper, sliced cucumber, flax seeds, hemp, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, shaved turmeric, cracked pepper, macadamia nuts or walnuts, 3 Brazil nuts a day end up in there. And then I make my own dressing with a Dijon, extra virgin olive oil, and apple cider vinegar. And that's kind of, and then an avocado. I have half an avocado a day. That's at night. So the macadamia nuts are at lunch, and then walnuts and avocado at night. And then, tofu and lunch, edamame at night. And then I cook some egg whites to top up the protein as well.
Andrew, this sounds amazing. When are you inviting all of us, all of your listeners and myself over for this salad? This is like a work of art.
It would be fun to, yeah. See, like, and I forget things. I also put wet seaweed. So I add some wet seaweed in there. And then in the winter and fall, I roast the plants. So it's whatever kind of is in the grocery store. So it could be eggplants, zucchini, squashes, pumpkins. So I roast them in the morning and then have half of it for lunch, half for dinner, with all the same kind of the flax and everything thrown on top. But it's just a different base from the leafy greens that's cold to a warmer in the fall and winter side.
Well, okay, so now you're going into your fall winter era right now.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Bermuda, so it's still pretty summery here. It's my fall winter probably won't start till November. We'll see. So you mentioned you like to mix stuff up. Other than, well, it sounds like your nutrition, you're pretty consistent, and then sleep, right? So I think back to Dr. Matthew Walker's QQRT, right? The quality, quantity, regularity, timing. It sounds like you try to stay really consistent there. So can you take us through, I guess, not just your sleep, but your recovery routine as well? Because you mentioned, right, coming at it from the fitness mindset, right? Heavy strength training, heavy training on triathlons. A lot of people don't realize the importance of rest and recovery until they get those injuries. Like, oh, wait, there's this pillar on to perform well and have the fitness. I actually need to think about the recovery side. So given your own personal experience, how do you think about that pillar overall in both the sleep side and the recovery side?
I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., and in that area, I would argue, others might have different opinions. I think even when I go back, I just notice my stress levels are higher, and it's very much a culture of wanting to be focused on work, and which is a beautiful thing, to find meaning in work, but maybe losing sleep to focus on work. And I was very much wrapped up in this culture. And then when I was working briefly in Mexico, I started getting the right amount of sleep, like 8 hours of sleep per night. And I realized that this was such a game changer. And I started asking myself, what have I been doing? I felt better the next day. And so I was even more productive in what I was doing. And I just started to realize how even though those things were important, this sleep was that much more important. So focusing on the recovery section. And when we take that time to really recover, focusing on sleep or other forms of recovery, even if it's recovery could be in the sense of, relaxation strategies, even if someone is learning to paint or if they're meditating or another hobby that brings them joy, that downtime, that recreational activity might make someone more creative when they are doing their work. So that downtime is now super important to me, having a flexibility and lifestyle where I really can prioritize that. Now, my biggest challenge for myself right now in terms of sleep is going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. That's something that I really value. And that's in terms of all these pillars, what I need to focus on most. And it's just been always an ongoing thing because of my work schedule being a little bit all over the place, choices that I make for myself. And so that is the evolution for me. I think some things that I do really try to do to make sure that I'm setting myself up for success sleeping. Number one is just being aware of my caffeine intake. So I love coffee. I just love it. But caffeine does have a half-life of 5 hours. And for me, I notice when I have coffee in the afternoon, even if I'm going to bed at the right time, waking up at the right time, my quality of sleep at night is not great. And so caffeine intake is something that's super important to me, and really making sure that I'm taking the time to wind down at the end of the day. So where I live, I don't turn on the overhead lights. I'll typically just do lamps to really, not have the bright lights, energy, and then also screen time. Really trying to be mindful of not looking at my phone all too much, especially if the screen is all the way on bright, or not trying to check emails or something right before bedtime. So really taking time to focus on other things. Again, some days I'm better than others. These are goals that I'm working on as well, just trying to prioritize good quality of sleep.
I typically find that even the most optimized, there's one people struggle with. They're like, oh yeah, the social connection right now. Like I've gone all in on all these, and like that's one I'm really not great at, or the sleep side, or and a lot of times they're just total blind spots, right? And you at least understand the importance. You're working towards it. It's figuring out how do I do it, and you have the agency, right? Saying, hey, these are decisions I've made in my career. It's not life is happening to me that makes it hard to do this. It's saying, hey, I'm choosing this over this right now. Right? This is my choice, and here's how I prioritize it too. Are there any, for me, a big game changer was realizing how light sensitive I was. And I found this eye mask that I just swear by. And it's been amazing, especially traveling, because you can't always have blackout curtains, right? Like you could have your home set up perfect. Like, oh, I have my 8 sleep with my chili pad, and I have all the things. But when I travel, you need to be a little more adaptive. Do you have any tools like that, earplugs, eye mask, anything that you say, hey, these really help me get good quality sleep?
So my pillow is laughable. It's so true that exposure to light and comfort, they're crucial elements, right? Exposure to light, noise, comfort levels, the temperature of the room. These are all crucial elements. My pillow is tough for me to sleep without. It's like non-existent of a pillow. It's literally just the casing of a pillow where you can put pillow inserts. And for me, not having like a lot of a padded pillow, just really something small is helpful. I'm also a big fan for myself of weighted blankets. I live in a desert, so right now it's super hot. So weighted blankets during the summertime aren't necessarily very enticing, but throughout most of the year, I really enjoy weighted blankets. In terms of some of the benefits, it's also, it just feels like a warm hug. So weighted blankets.
Nice. And with sleep and then the fitness, all the things you do you do any tracking? Do you have trackers that you use?
I don't. I very much connect with some people I know are numbers people. It sounds like, Andrew, are you a numbers person?
I am a numbers
You are.
guy. Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And I so admire that mindset. I'm not necessarily a numbers person. And so I am more so motivated by feel, right? So, like, how did I feel after something? And I think that, and so for me, that's something that I continue to check in with. It's okay, well, how am I feeling in this moment is a question that I ask myself often, or like, how relaxed am I in this moment? So those are measures that I take for myself. So no, I don't necessarily have any wearables or technology, but I think that they can be so motivating for such a large number of the population.
Yeah, I mean, they can also become a crutch, right? You end up measuring what's easier to measure because there are data behind it versus things that may be more subjective, not have a number behind it. And I've only come to realize more recently, as a competitive swimmer, long distance, that there was this old joke my teammate would have of there are two kinds of swimmers, those with talent and then distance swimmers. And basically those that didn't have talent just had to swim really far because no one else was willing to do it. And I would do the really far stuff. So I was saying I had no talent. But to do it, I turned off that signal from my body to my mind. And so when I interview people like you, like, oh, I just listen, like I lost that language. And so that's something I'm having to relearn. And so for me, it's like, someone maybe who's autistic who has a hard time reading the signals from other people. They need coping mechanisms to help them see those signals. And I think for me, that's where the data comes in of, I don't really know how to listen. Like I'm just trained till I get hurt. And even with the data, 90% of the time I'm overstretching what I should do. So I don't know. I'm sure there's all sorts of pathology in there that I could figure out.
Kudos to you for finding solutions that are working for you. And I think that, data from wearables, asking myself how I'm feeling, like these are just all different forms of measurement. And again, it's not necessarily that one is better than the other, but it's all how we're navigating throughout the world and what tools are best for us, to return back to those statements that you made before.
Yeah, best for us, and recognizing it change with time, right? Like I'd love to get better at being more in tune with my body, listening to it at least as much as what a tracker is saying, right? And so the right answer for me today may not be the same one 2 or 3 years from now as I change.
Coming from a spinning background, and when I lead instructor trainings, we talk about, even when you're leading a group fitness class, how there are so many different ways to measure intensity, right? You can measure it through power, through heart rate, through ratings of perceived exertion, asking someone how hard they're working. And again, these are all just tools. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just different ways of looking at the world and someone's experience.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't thank you enough for sharing your way of looking at the world right now and your experience, given everything you've done with me and our listeners today. With recognizing it has to all come together, and there are many things we can and could be doing across each pillar. If you had to pick just 5 things and say, hey, here are my 5 that I'm going to go to, what would those 5 for you be?
For me, bringing play into my life is a huge value of mine. And so I guess it starts with like, what are my values? What do I want to enjoy from this life and from the world? Play is a big part. And so I typically try to carry something around with me that embodies some element of play. One of the things that I used to carry around was like a purple crayon. So then when I was out at a restaurant, I could write like a little note to the server in this purple crayon, and or like a little thing of bubbles, because no one expects you to have bubbles in your purse. And right now I have a ring pop in my purse. Again, something that no one is expecting you to carry a ring pop around in your purse. But for some reason it does come up in conversation, and it's like a positivity booster. So for me, a must have is some sort of positivity booster. I would say probably for sleep and relaxation, my weighted blanket, which I give kudos to my friend, Veronica. She introduced me to the idea of a weighted blanket. And for friends, when we've been going through difficult times, you're going to laugh at this as well, a coloring book. Sometimes when myself and my friends have gone through difficult times, just being with each other and drawing and just focusing on coloring in an adult coloring book. This coloring book it's like the Sisterhood of the traveling pants or something.
Yeah.
We just all kind of like trade off with it. And even if someone doesn't feel like ready to speak on what they're speaking on, just being with someone and coloring together and, someone speaking up when they want to, it's almost like a form of parallel play where you're engaging in this activity together. And so I would say that would be my third one is an adult coloring book. And a fourth must have for me would probably, again, be the All Trails app. It's been so helpful in my local environment. It's allowed me to see, trails that I've never been and explore even in my local environment, places that I've never been and see them from new perspectives, as you've talked about before. And so my All Trails app. And then I would say my final one, you talked about Jody, our mutual friend. I would say Jody's book. So You Only Die Once. Jody is just so funny. And I think that is Jody's message of, living life with a sense of vitality and understanding that we only have so much time is just a message that I think that everyone can benefit from in some sort of capacity. It's, what's most important to us and how can we prioritize that on a daily basis?
Yeah, I'm wearing my memento mori bracelet that I got as a gift the day I recorded the session with Jody. So I was like, Jody, I got to show you this. I really love kind of how this came pretty full circle on the coloring book idea. I didn't think about it. I had a friend who unfortunately recently passed that had bad cancer, and she would have these adult coloring books, and where we started with that synchronicity and the social connection of this thing that you can share and you're getting in sync and you're physically doing the same thing, and just having that the parallel play like you talked about, it just made me rethink it and took me back to her and that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss. What a beautiful thing that she had those.
Yeah. So for someone, and thank you, someone who is just trying to get that first step going, right? Saying, hey, what is the on-ramp? Where would you suggest they start? Because you work with patients in all different aspects. Where's a great starting point for people?
I would say when you're thinking about the pillars, your pillars with a lively, when we list those out, I think the number one would be, okay, well, what resonates with me most in this moment? What's a general area that I feel like I might benefit from some sort of improvement or not even benefit from some sort of improvement, but just, feel more lively, right? And so from there, we could identify some general area and then narrow in more specifically. So for example, for me, if I am really resonating with sleep and recovery, that's something I feel like I could really benefit from some sort of improvement. Maybe I'm going to narrow in more specifically on, okay, well, I started to notice that my sleep quality at night isn't necessarily so great due to the caffeine that I'm consuming. Maybe I'm going to set a goal for the next 5 days. I'm going to make sure that I don't consume any caffeine after 12 or something like that, because I notice on those days, my sleep quality at night isn't so great. So taking it just kind of like one small piece at a time, identifying a general area, and then maybe narrowing in more specifically on something that we really resonate can be a good way to go.
And understanding everything's kind of been around health or Healthspan, how to invest in it. But that young Olivia had this very strong sweet tooth. What is your one guilty? Like, hey, this probably isn't the most healthy thing, but it helps me live a lively life because it helps me feel alive and enjoy what I'm doing.
I would say that my guilty pleasure, I still enjoy chocolate. Yeah. So little Olivia is still deep within here. And so, yeah, I would chocolate, mindless reality TV can also be a good guilty pleasure. Let's be real. Sometimes we just want to turn the brain off and just cruise. And so I would say those would be the two. The combination of chocolate and peanut butter, it's the greatest combination known to man. No one can convince me otherwise. So
Well, that is a great place to close. Chocolate and peanut butter. Good. Can't get better than that. Olivia, thank you so much for everything you shared today. Thank you for your journey. And what I really admire is it's not static. And I think the way you've communicated it as well as, hey, right now, right? Like, here's what I know, here's what I'm doing, but I'm not locked into this. And neither should anybody listening to this be locked into anything. Have that open mind, have that beginner's mind, that curiosity, because we're here to learn.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Andrew. Really enjoyed this conversation, and a fan of your TED Talk and your mission here. So
thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.